Hi, this is Chris Collins bringing you another installment from my Agile Whiteboard video series. Today we're going to take a closer look at the role of the product owner, or its equivalent in extreme programming, the customer. We will examine why this role is crucial to the DoD and to the success of any Agile project. As we have been training programs across the DoD, one common question we get asked is who should be the product owner. Is it the project manager? Is it the end user? Should it be a government person or maybe a contractor? The way I answer the question is let's understand the responsibilities and activities of the product owner or PO first, and then decide who can best fill that role in your program. The PO may not do all these activities themselves, but they are ultimately responsible to ensure all these activities are accomplished. So what are the responsibilities of the product owner? They create the shared vision that guides product development. They create and update the product roadmap. They determine what gets built each iteration or sprint. They accept or reject what gets built each iteration. They decide what provides value to the end user through prioritizing the product backlog. They clarify the scope of the user stories. They define the acceptance criteria for each user story. They refine the product backlog each iteration to ensure that the stories at the top are at the right granularity or that they meet the team's definition of ready. The product owner in our world is inherently government because this person is the gatekeeper to the product backlog, which are our requirements. They determine what goes into the backlog and where in the prioritization this story will fall, and thus how soon will it get built. They are the voice of the end user. This role controls the scope. When we discover a new user story from one of our many feedback points, it's up to the PO whether this new user story is more valuable than an existing story. They have to make the trade-offs. Agile's not magic. If we learn something new, we don't get it for free. It will either add to the schedule or cost, or something else will have to come off the plate. But if the new feature is more valuable than what we were planning to build, why would we not want to switch and build this more valuable feature? Let's take a closer look at the activities of the PO throughout the 5 events in Scrum. First, in the sprint planning meeting, the PO is there to work with the development team to determine what the team will be working on during the next sprint. They do this by prioritizing the user stories. The development team knows its capacity, and they're going to roughly plan that amount of work from the top of the product backlog. The PO is there to clarify any scope questions that may come up about a particular user story as the team works to create their sprint backlog. During the sprint, the product owner needs to be available to the development team to answer questions about user stories and to participate in estimation exercises. While they do not get a vote on the effort for a user story, they are there to clarify scope. They need to ensure that the acceptance criteria are written for each user story. Sometimes the PO will work with the team to define acceptance criteria before sprint planning as part of their definition of ready, but inevitably there will be acceptance criteria questions that will come up during a sprint as the team learns more during implementation that will need input from the PO. They need to be periodically refining the product backlog. We talk about the product backlog being deep. The D in deep stands for detailed appropriately. This is what backlog refinement is all about. As things in the backlog start bubbling up in priority, they need to be in iteration-sized chunks. So the PO will work with the team to split larger stories or epics into smaller user stories that are small enough they can be completed in one iteration. As a rule of thumb, the PO wants to have at least 2 sprints worth of stories ready to be planned before the start of sprint planning. The other part of backlog refinement is to ensure that the stories have the appropriate prioritization to ensure the team is working on the highest value items for the end user. They can also work with the development team during the sprint to verify that user stories met their acceptance criteria. The PO is not a required participant in the daily Scrum. If they attend, they usually do not speak during the meeting. I think it's helpful when the PO does attend because that makes them immediately available after the daily Scrum for any needed follow-on meetups to clarify user stories and acceptance criteria. During the sprint review, the product owner gets feedback from the stakeholders and reviews the work the team accomplished. The PO is ultimately responsible for saying whether a user story met its acceptance criteria or it did not. They take the feedback from the stakeholders and users to add new user stories or to adjust priorities to existing user stories. The PO is not required to be part of the sprint retrospective, but they can certainly be invited. I normally see this happen when the team is having issues with the acceptance criteria not being defined, or the PO is not as available as often as the team needs them, or if the backlog is not in a good state at the beginning of sprint planning. In these cases, I have seen teams invite the PO so the whole Scrum team can figure out how to solve these issues. In XP, they developed a customer and developer bill of rights. These two bill of rights help delineate the responsibilities of the two roles and help set expectations for each role. So let's take a closer look at the customer bill of rights, and this should provide a better understanding of the expectations for the PO role. First, as a PO, you have the right to an overall plan to know what can be accomplished, when, and at what cost. You have the right to get the most possible value out of every programming week. You have the right to see progress in a running system proven to work by passing repeatable tests that you specify. You have the right to change your mind, to substitute functionality, and to change priorities without paying exorbitant cost. You have the right to be informed of schedule changes in time to choose how to reduce the scope to restore the original date. You can cancel at any time and be left with a useful working system reflecting investment to date. Now let's look at what the development team members are entitled to, and this will help show what is needed from the PO and what is not part of the PO role's responsibilities. So as a development team member, you have the right to know what is needed with clear declarations of priority. You have the right to produce quality work at all times. You have the right to ask for and receive help from peers, managers, and customers. You have the right to make and update your own estimates. You have the right to accept your responsibilities instead of having them assigned to you. In summary, the PO is a critical role for the success of any project. They determine what gets built and when it gets built. They are the voice of the user and are responsible for ensuring the user gets what they need. If you want more information on the role of the product owner, there is a good book titled The Professional Product Owner.